welcome everyone to the Coral Springs Museum of Art. We are privileged tonight, honored tonight with two amazing artists that we have exhibiting right now in the shows that you see here. We have Amanda Linares of Dialogues Across Walls and Edison Peñafiel of Barrio Alto. Thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you, Daniel.
We're hoping to be able to pick at these amazing creative minds that you have and just see what comes out of the conversation naturally. I've got some questions that I'm curious about for each of you and for both of you, but of course we'd like to hear what you want to ask each other, probably more than anything else. So, welcome everybody. Is there anything you want to start out by plugging or saying before we get into it?
Ladies first.
Well, I do want to thank all the people that came because I know the drive is long and it's in the middle of the week. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. I guess I can start saying that this exhibition or this project wasn't possible without the Broward grant that I got this year as the Regional Artist Support Grant. And from there, I had the opportunity of reaching out Eddie, who had the great idea of having this 3 solo show with 3 artists. Mitzi as well, who is actually from Mexico. She has a solo show here with us, and yeah, thanks to Eddie and the grant, this was all possible.
And Juliana for
allowing us, of course, for allowing us to take over the space and create these 2 beautiful exhibitions. If you want to say something.
Yeah, the same. Thanks to Broward County for facilitating the grant for the production of this project, Barrio Alto, which helped me for the production during 2 art residencies in Europe last year. And and Juliana and the museum for allowing the presentation of these projects. This is a smaller version of a larger collection of artists and works, and which will be probably possible in the future, I hope. With budget. Yeah. And so basically, let me start with the main project and how we got to present this. So the idea was to present Barrio Alto, and which deals with construction and infrastructure in a way, dioramas, and having this idea of architecture and seeing the work of friends of mine or people that I have met during art residencies, and kind of having a cohesive idea of presenting this architectural-based work or construction-based work. I saw Mitzi's work on Tidal during Art Week in Miami last year. And I connected right away with the monochromatic or achromatic aesthetic and the construction workers and the idea of the facade in a way with, in this case, gender, and the construction and the double layering or superposition of images. And on Amanda's work, there's in a way fragility, but also the concrete being present in both. The furniture integration in drawings and our actual furniture pieces as well is very interesting in the idea of the intimate, but also having that structure in the work. And so the idea was kind of combining the facade and the concrete, right?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think what I really like is how you can see some sort of connectivity through identity, but also like there's some like political, social dialogue as well in different aspects, either from an intimate space, and then from a public one, right? So we have like the private and the public, the indoors and the outdoors, which I think is really interesting. So from I guess I can talk a little bit more about my show, and I do talk about these like two elements, this duality of the interior and the exterior. And I've been exploring the material of concrete for a while, and it's a material. So I'm very material oriented. Like all my work, I'm always exploring different ways of, creating projects. And I kind of like take media depending on the idea that I want to build. But concrete has become in this very consistent element or material within my work because it really helps me to, I guess, ground myself and connect with my origins, which I come from Cuba. So there's this connection with the island, with the architecture there, as opposed to Miami, that everything is mainly drywall, which was like a very shocking thing when I came in 2013, just to experience how space can really like make an impact on yourself. So I also like the fragility within this material, concrete, because of the way that you can use it can become very fragile. I create this kind of like plates, like concrete plates that are like maybe 1 inch thick or sometimes less. I do put something structural inside, so it's not completely, absolutely fragile, but in other works it's not, doesn't have anything that can hold it. But having this like conversation of a material that can supposed to be very sturdy and durable, but then at the same time it becomes very fragile, and then you have these drawings that also are very delicate on that maybe look like fossils of things, right? Like archives or like archaeological elements. And I wanted to really talk about how the interior and the exterior of the landscape of a house kind of like combine and merge. And that's how I bring drawings of insects like grasshoppers, cocuyos, which are click beetles that I used to see a lot when I was a child in Cuba, millipedes, like moths, things like that. Ants, there's a lot of ants as well. So I'm not only considering also in my work walls, but also the floor. So I guess I'm really working with things that are unseen or taken granted for, right? Like the space where we walk on. To me, it's very important as well.
One of the interesting things that you mentioned early, it's the drywall. Yeah, and to me it was very important in developing my work. And was that shock when moving to the US, finding out that this material exists and that you can punch and make a hole on the wall, and it's very fragile.
That's why in the movies you will see people punching.
And and compared to South America, because of I guess earthquakes and things like that.
Yeah, and also history, like colonialism, like that's why there's a lot of like architecture, with concrete.
So in the work that I started developing back then, this is from 2012. I lost all the work and then redid the whole work during these residencies. And so back then I was thinking of like comparing or this concept of barrio alto. What is a barrio alto? Barrio alto could be a favela, could be like an affluent neighborhood. So material-wise, right? Mm-hmm. Is it cardboard? Like, okay, I'm going to extreme. I'm using like actual cardboard to produce my constructions, my buildings. And questioning the materiality, questioning the value of real estate and the crash of real estate. My aunt back then lost a house that she had as an investment. So it's like questioning this contradiction of, I guess, the value of housing depending on the location, and not so much on the material, I guess.
But
Yeah.
but yes, with the material, because you're using cardboard. You know, you
Yeah.
decided to I guess work with something that gets easily lost
Discarded, yeah.
and gone. Yeah, like very fragile as well.
Mhm.
So there is some sort of conversation, like a parallel conversation in that
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
In the materials you're both using to address human-made structures, from like the cardboard of these, smaller scale forms, to the references to buildings in Cuba with the concrete and everything, almost every single human structure that's ever existed is dust, is gone forever. And anything we're living in or operating in now is not going to live much longer than we do. We have a finite kind of timeline on the things that we're using to make. How do you see that reflection of permanence of things that you create, or the idea of creating things that are ephemeral, not meant to last? Is that balance present in your mind when you're thinking about this body of work or any body of work in general?
I'm not thinking of that. I don't know. I hope they last, but I don't know how for
Like
how long.
big picture, right? Like we're a blip, in history with a short time, and yeah, maybe we can preserve something for hundreds of years, but the conversations that you have around these pieces I see as clearly the most important thing that's going on with the work. But I think it's interesting, especially in the human structures that we hear on the news every other day are falling down for one reason or another in various places of the world. If that is something that comes in when you think about the cracks in the concrete, or clearly the falling nature of the buildings and ruin.
I think I think that's something that comes a lot when I was creating these pieces as well, and when I was exploring the material, the fact that I have to reinforce the inside, if I want to make sure that it has a more lasting life. But at the same time, it's very interesting how humanity, we humans have this very big preoccupation about making things last forever, or conservation, right? And in art there's a lot of that, because if you are buying a piece, you want that to have a really long lasting life, right? You're already investing money in it. But at the same time, I don't know if this is correct to say or not, but I feel like if my work doesn't last I don't know, more than 100 years, I'll be fine with it.
It did its job.
It did its job while I was living. I don't know. Yeah, definitely I would love for people to enjoy it as much as they can. But there's also something very beautiful and real about things that are not going to, last forever. And that's the reality. We all, are born and then we die, and that's the life cycle. So it's kind of a little bit selfish to think, that something is going to be forever. Yeah.
And I guess it also has to do with the relevance of the work, and if that conversation is still around. Yeah, so if not, then you just store it and let it live for longer, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think about something that you had said previously. I can't remember where, Edison, but the idea that the sort of powers that be keep us in these lanes, almost like predetermined lanes. We're sort of funneled into ways of living or operating, being that are maybe not in our control. We're not aware of that. And you think about these things. I see it referenced all the time when you talk about your work. So my question for both of you is, as you both emerge as these talented artists that are being seen in, a pretty focused art market, do you see the powers of the art world and art institutions, as you deal with bigger and bigger institutions, as something that's a struggle to embrace? Do you feel that there's any kind of changes in the way that you operate because of the recognition that you're getting?
Oh,
wow. Yeah, well, it depends on my work became very political, and I guess, a little bit difficult for institutions to start talking about certain issues. So there's an agenda, I guess. So most of the times that I have been able to present the work has been like organized by myself or in collaboration with some space, experimental space that allows for it. And but again, the thing is, to me, is create a space for this to happen, the conversations. Yeah.
I think maybe what worries me, because I really haven't done much like exhibitions outside of Florida. So I guess what worries me is like, how are people going to view or understand the work outside of a context that's very tied with like immigration, like this type of immigration, or like even context, right? Like lands. So I don't think I have like a specific answer for that. I feel like I am getting little by little recognized, but more within Florida and in Miami. So I don't know what the conversation will be, outside here. Yeah, and what the limitations will be if that's, the case when, it happens.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
When it gets, I'm curious, Edison, about your work in represented in these photographs, this city that you've built, this, if we want to call it a cityscape. That work, not physically being in the space and viewed through the lens of, like you called them, sort of noir sort of photos. Like I think of old silent films when I look at these, and the way that there's some way in which that they're shot, the angles, all the diagonal lines that communicate that movement or destruction. But in the process of making these photographs, was that a part of it, to actually destroy that city? Or like, was this moments before you just completely smashed it, or is it preserved somewhere? Or tell me a little bit about how the work like manifested as photographs in this case.
Yeah, to me the work actually was born during a second semester photography class in 2012, and as a 5-6 piece body of work. And during this residency, I was able to extend it up to 30 pieces. Yeah, and let me see. Back then, it was about just playing with the material and photography. Let me see. Studio photography, where I was able to create a photo, not take a photo, but to create, to make it. And that was I was very interested in that process where I can manipulate the image before being shot to stage everything. And later on in other projects, it became part of the work to mimic in a way the media, the news, because they edit in post-production, they show you what they want you to see, they feed you that information. So, but I'm going to the absurd in my work and try to create these images that represent certain social issues, not specifically here in Barrio Alto, but in other works. While producing this in Portugal last year, this was September, I was just shooting the regular cardboard that looked like building, but then the destruction started happening. And that's when the war in the Middle East started happening with all the bombardments. So that's where all these images of the collapsed buildings started showing up. And to me, that documentation is the only thing that exists. The cardboards are gone after they have been shot. Yeah. As I guess it has to do with the idea of evidence. This is the only evidence that we have, and and the process of the camera. I use the camera for all of my work. Is the device that captures reality, even that reality that I create or recreate. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting juxtaposition to Amanda, where you have cracks in your work, some of them real and some of them just simulated via graphite. So you're sort of doing the opposite in some sense, that you are locking it in place. You're re-emphasizing what's physically there in the work. Do you, or maybe this has changed and evolved, but do you approach that as when there's a crack in the concrete, you work with that, or do you generate that? Do you make that happen because you know you want cracks to be a feature? Because in some places you see them, in other places it looks like they're masked, but there's the element of the physical and the graphite versions.
Yeah, like the real and the imagined, let's say. The process was not intended to be like that. That's the reality. The first piece that I did with cracks was the floor piece called Sismo 5.1. And that one was just an accident, basically. I was actually trying to achieve a more like regular type of surface, but I was encountered with that, which I think it was probably the amount of water that I did in the mixing. But after I had that result, I was like, this is actually really interesting, and I've never had considered kind of going with like earthquakes or like this shifting of the structure, and that I guess can be seen as, I don't know, like something from natural, like, because the dialogue that I'm also having here, it can be seeing home as many things. I can be talking about a structure, I can be talking about the body, I can be talking about the earth, the universe, so home has changes, and even though when you think the foundation of this house or this structure is like, strong, that it's a lie. Things happen and it crumbles and you get hurt, like, I don't know, like, so I really like that kind of element of like working with the idea of a structure that can be damaged in that way as well, right? That can suffer, right? So they look like wounds. They look like wounds to me. And I was going through something and in that moment when I was creating that piece, so it really had a really intimate resonance with myself. So I really wanted to embrace that cracking, and from there I had the idea of creating more pieces like in this same with this same aesthetic. And I really wanted to emphasize the cracking, so that's when I had the idea of also incorporating graphite and kind of like creating, I guess, the cracking as a way of an adornment within the piece, of also showing the beauty within, this hurt material. Yeah.
You talked about physical loss and detachment, both like of the body in some of your soft works and the older works, but also, in terms of like detachment of location or place or sense of belonging, home, that sort of thing. Like many of us, we're all kind of transplants from somewhere else here in South Florida. What I'm curious about for both of you is, something I found is the longer I'm away from home, where I was born and originated, I've spent now almost a third of my life down here, and I'm finding that the memories start piling up down here in this place that isn't home, or hasn't been home. And this pile of how many memories I have from where I came from to where I've been recently is a thing I worry about at times, like how much of my identity am I holding on to from that time before. For both of you, do you find that that's a struggle to maintain that balance? Is your work the way that you anchor yourself to your sense of belonging? Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
In my work, I think I have embraced like the immigrant identity, and because, I have tried to exhibit my work in Ecuador, where I'm from, but people are not talking about that. They do not connect, or the institutions do not connect with that, because it's not an issue. I'm talking this about like 8 years ago when I tried to present my work. Now it's a different situation with all the migration waves going through Ecuador. But yeah, it's like to me, it's trying to make an identity now with the work, where the work is a self-portrait. It's to me, it's about adaptation, like the uses of the mask, like when I didn't have documents, it's like hiding or using another identity, and so yeah, so it becomes a reflection of the self.
I think for me it's kind of like the same thing. There's a like adaptation, resilience, right? There's a sensation of struggle, I guess, and I do struggle with the idea of like, because I came 11 years ago and I haven't gotten back to Cuba, and when I was graduating from Newell School of the Arts in 2020, I was planning to, plan a trip over there, and then COVID happened, and I was like, okay, this is a sign that I should not go, just because the situation has gotten really, really bad, and I still have family there, like far relatives, but I still have a ton of family there, and I know what they're going through. So the fact that I haven't gone, it kind of really weighs on me in a sense that I don't want to be, completely disconnected from that other, land, which I know is not my reality right now, but I don't want to forget about it. So many times while doing this work and just like being on my own, like I watch a bunch of like YouTube channels of Cuban YouTubers just to like see what's going on and what they're going through. So I guess that's what's keeping me more, grounded in that sense.
But it feels like an active thing that you sort of have to focus on doing that, so it doesn't like slip away in everything else that you're working with.
Yeah.
And you agree with that, right? With that, your work is kind of a self-portrait as well in some form.
I do think so. There's definitely a lot of subtlety in the material, the way that I'm choosing the imagery. Like, there's definitely some sort of like intimate dialogue. I mean, it is definitely a reflection of my experiences, even though I try to make it a little bit, more, public as well, like and people can relate to. So it's not only a personal thing. I do want to, have people kind of have this sensation of like I'm talking about different, stories.
Sure, and I think about that sense of a self-portrait, and then what an audience might think of that when they see insects and things. But you talked about the sense of being unseen in some senses, and I'm sure that plays into the things underfoot that we don't focus on. Out of the imagery that you've put onto the concrete, you've taken the time to representationally record those things. What image do you feel resonates the strongest with you now, out of everything over here in the show?
I really like the piece within Jardín Cocuyos, and that's actually the only one that is not graphite, like drawing on concrete. It's actually oil on wood. And I really like this piece because it's a really like personal, it has a really personal inspiration. Because as I mentioned before, when I was a child, I used to go with my friends from the neighborhood, and go to this like space that was exactly in front of my house that we call it El Placer, which doesn't even make sense because it means pleasure. Yeah, I don't know why we call it like that. Like I tried to look for that word in Spanish, and doesn't translate to anything like that. But it was a space between like houses that there was nothing there built. It was only plants. And there were a bunch of cocuyos, like click beetles, all over at night, and it was very magical. So we will all go there and catch them and whatever, make wishes, bye, come back. It was kind of like that. But then as I grew up, I realized that those insects were disappearing little by little. And when I was creating this work, which I'm actually using a piece of wood of the back of a mirror, so I guess I'm working even more there with what is unseen and the memories and, hippocampus, I guess. And I was also creating this other piece, the grasshoppers. Someone told me as well that they used to play or used to see grasshoppers when they were also kids here in Florida, and they haven't, seen them as much. So there's also this idea, I guess, of things that are disappearing or like moving away or shifting at a larger scale. So I really like that too, that without really noticing, I kind of created that dialogue where I'm not only incorporating Cuba, but I'm also incorporating Florida in a way. So I'm trying to now, I guess, have a conversation between two worlds, right? Two identities, and embracing here too. Yeah.
It is fascinating that you're using insects because of this talk of migration, and as the planet's climate changes, so many insects are slightly shifting where they are to accommodate that, and so it's migration on different levels. Edison, to that point, you talked about, this is in a sense your story of migration, but it's important to you that it's a general story of migration, and everyone's experience of that. Are there any particular instances that were really influential to you when you were thinking about these bodies of work connecting outside of your own?
Yeah, definitely. So there's this guy, Domingo. He used to work at this printing place that I worked for a few months when I didn't have documents. And Domingo, he was about like 50 or 60 years old, and he will have crossed the border like 5-6 times already. And so he will stay in the US for 2 years, just save some money, go back for a few months to Guatemala, and then do the trip over and over again. So I guess it was very Sisyphean of him to be doing the same action, and that kind of influenced my work, and not only to portray his experience, but the same experience that is being repeated, maybe not by the same people, but throughout time, throughout history. Yeah, so all of these characters in my work, there's this idea of the repetition, the rhythm, in this case, the squares, the rectangles in the photograph. But in the video, it's an actual loop. So these characters are always bound to the same action forever.
If I could, real quick, and this will sound like we're plugging a museum program, but your memory mapping workshop that's going to relate to the parallel paths piece, you've talked about the community collaboration component of that as being crucial. What did you mean by that? Why is it crucial? What is it about the just community engagement with your art in general, or with that piece specifically, that's important to you?
Yeah, so I've done artist books before, and I think I really like the element of people interacting with the work. Actually, my BFA were like 3 large tables, and each table had an artist book, so I really enjoyed the element of, having someone like traveling the work, opening the pages of the book, reading, so having like a personal narration and a personal, like, I guess, experience with the work. So I really enjoy that. And I've been trying, I guess, to like have more of that element with my work. And one of the things, the main element as well in this case, when I proposed this project for the Broward County, was to have the workshop, because I wanted to have a piece that would change throughout the exhibition, and where people, felt like they were adding or were heard somehow, in the work.
And to that point of books, I know you mentioned that literary inspirations are important to your work. I don't know if you're referring to this body of work in particular or in general. Like, what are some of your literary inspiration, books, novels, or just media, I suppose, that's gotten into your mind while you were making this?
Yeah, for this specific body of work, I remember I was reading Dulce María Loinás. There's a book of her that's called Jardín. It happened that I was like reading that because this body of work that you see here, it has a lot of pieces from my last show last year, my first solo project room, solo show at Tunnel, and I originally had the idea of creating like a night garden. I don't know why, because I really like the idea of like having this like things that are not obvious and like, you know, the ambiguity, again, the unseen. And little by little, I mean, from that original idea, it was transforming to something more of what I was already working on. But I really love Dulce María Loinás' work because she also talks about Cuba, but like this like duality of an island that is surrounded by the sea. So there's a lot of elements within her work that I really enjoy, and the personification of the sea is really important too. But this book, Jardín, is really beautiful, and she also talks about a house, and there's like also this like time, like the way that she works with time within the book is amazing, and I really enjoyed that. And within my work, I'm also talking about time in different ways, either if I'm encapsulating moments from the day with the shadows, for example, or just like, you know, little snapshots of past memories. But yeah, that was one of the main inspirations for this work. And then I also have had inspiration from, there's a book called Braiding Sweetgrass that I read during COVID that I really, really liked. And it was talking about, I guess, more of the loss of contact with nature. The writer, I don't remember her name right now. It's like, I think it's Robinson something, but she's a native Indian American from a specific tribe on the north, and the way that she was talking and like including biology, because she's also a biologist and a teacher, I really enjoyed that too. I think Poetics of a Space, I think that's another book. I don't know if I'm saying the title right now well, but yeah, I guess I'm drawn a lot about things that are related with like the memory, either the memory of a land or of a house, things like that.
That idea of language made me think of, Edison, on your website, you have a bit of Morse code. I believe it says the powers that be will not parasite on us.
Yeah.
One, I was curious, is there something about Morse code that just caught your attention? I thought that was an interesting thing I didn't expect to find there. And then other than that, I'm interested in hearing if you've got advice for us to kind of resist the powers that be, if you found any good ways.
I don't know. That was a line part of instead of an artist statement, it was a manifesto that I had back then. So that line stuck with me, and I just decided to keep it there if you were able to find it. I'm not too fan of let me see, groups or let me see. Yeah, I guess groups or ideas as groups. It's up to you how you want to escape the powers. Yeah. Yeah.
I know that you had mentioned this, and I love the quote about your work being an excuse for conversations, basically, to hold that. I'm wondering how you both find balance between your work speaking for itself and just standing on its own versus that side of it that is engagement with people, and it's not just the mysterious thing that they may or may not understand and then walk away from, Do you find that you think about that balance? How much is there? Is it too didactic, or is it closed off too much that you're not engaging people? How do you find that balance?
I think I developed that language during my studies, having this conversation with this professor and developing or not being didactic, I guess, and letting the work be the work, like an entity of itself that occupies and has a presence and affect the viewer somehow, and confronts and makes you feel something. To me, that I wanted to create that. And one of the first photographs that I printed of my second body of work, called Los Chupasangres, was this large photograph. Back then they were large, but now not anymore. They don't feel large anymore. But I was just like very nervous and waiting for the photograph to come out, like this actually. And I felt that I was giving birth to this character. So that's where I saw the potential of the work and these characters are what I was creating, and the presence that they have in the space. And to me, during that process, was to simplify the equation, to make it very simple, not many layers, to remove the layers. For example, in my installations, the characters are bound to one action only, be it breathing, walking, or just rocking. They do not do anything else. So I guess they're also trapped in a state of mind, and makes it easier for the viewer to digest, so to get that, I wouldn't say message, but to have that experience. Yeah.
Like you can jump into one of those individuals you see. I think you said you made 81 masks?
81 characters on the last video installation.
So each of those has an opportunity for people to kind of see themselves in.
Yeah, and they're masked, and you see that there's a guy wearing a mask, which is myself. Yeah, so I'm not trying to create a character, but to create a masked character. Yeah, so there's someone behind, and you can, I guess, as a viewer, project into one of these characters, connect with one. Maybe not yourself, but someone that you know that probably had that experience.
What was the answer?
The idea of, some artwork is telling you way too much, and it answers everything for you, and some is so mysterious that it feels like you can't penetrate it, So that balance of having a work stand on its own, but also allowing your work to be a social moment, a discussion around that work, is that something that you think about actively when you're making your work, or do you sort of let the creative process flow and then sort those later?
I think along the years, I've tried to let go a lot of control, because so I had two different I guess education experiences. In Cuba, when I studied in San Alejandro, the art academy, everything was very technical, because I was studying printmaking. Then I graduated and I did set design. But the art in Cuba, the way that I experienced it, it was very conceptual. So I don't think I had the maturity to understand or know what I wanted to do, or like even find a voice. So I was always worried about having a concept, and if I'm making something, there has to be a reason why I'm like making this move or making this mark. So that was super stressful for me all the time, and I had this like really bad like art blockage all the time. And it wasn't until I came here that I experienced a different type of education. I felt a little bit more freeing to like decide what I wanted to do. And I started graphic design in New School of the Arts, but still super like related with art in general. I was taking a bunch of electives in sculpture, printmaking again, photography, etc., etc. And I found artist books for the first time I took that class, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't even know that this type of, expression existed, where I could I guess put all together, I could be doing graphic things with typography. So I saw a way of connecting graphic design and printmaking and everything all together. But yeah, I guess having this experience of this different education, it relaxed me more, but also understanding and going through this very impactful life shift of becoming an immigrant and adapting to a new culture, and then you grow up, you get more mature and older, and I think for me, I needed that time to understand and find the voice and the aesthetic that I was looking for. So I don't know, I feel it's about timing, everyone's process has a very different type of time and rhythm. Some people find it earlier in their life careers, and then some people take longer to understand, or feel comfortable with what they're doing. And to me, it took all these years to really felt very sure of what I wanted to do. And yeah, it's been a long process.
And just to add to that, it's what I was saying before. Is letting the work be the work, and sometimes it requires things, and it starts asking you things. It's I want 2 more projectors, okay? Slide the credit card, buy 2 more projectors. Yeah, and it's letting the work be the work, and it's to me, I don't need to be next to my work to be explaining to you what it is about. It's just an experience, and experience it. That if you connect with it, it's good. If not, then no. I try to make it as simple as possible to be able to understand it, and just have that experience. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have layers, because there's little hidden things like the Morse code within the projects. There's little gems for you to find, but yeah.
I did find myself just staring to seeing something in that, that window, that area there. So it's amazing. I have one more question myself, and then for respect, would love to hear what you'd like to ask each other. But there's often that artist creative osmosis that happens in group shows. Not that this is a group show, but being, these 4 shows in one confined space, have you found that there's anything that's maybe kind of caught your attention in others' work in the show that may or may not turn into something, or anything that you thought just maybe spoke to the work that you have in the show, maybe not just to you as an artist?
Well, Eddie and I, we did an art residency last year. So we've already been very familiarized with each other's work. And I knew about this series too, so it was not really a big surprise.
I didn't know. Well, you started developing this work.
And
this is new to me, and I really enjoy it.
True, yeah. But you saw the process last year. I mean, when the first pieces were, putting it together.
No, but I'm very surprised, and more surprised as the work keeps developing from the tunnel project to this exhibition, and this last piece with the shadows, these integrations. I really like where it's going.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But Mitzi's work, I saw it as well during Art Basel last year, I think, as you did, and I really like her conversation, bringing more awareness during this. I mean, within this specific type of labor, and really love and enjoy how she's working with material, concrete, and another different level. So that type of contrast with my work, it was very interesting to find, for sure.
Yeah, and I was having this conversation with Mitzi. We did a road trip to visit one of the cementeras in North Carolina. And we were discussing about the project that she has currently 2 exhibitions in Mexico, the same project. And so it's the project about the trans women in this type of work, or is about everyone in this type of work, jobs. So, and having kind of like that critique while driving about the work was very interesting, and even though it is very seductive as a body of work, well, she realized that it was about everyone. It's not only the cementeras, but it's about like, as you mentioned, her mother used to be a construction worker as well. So it's about fighting. How do you extend that fight, or you keep pushing that fight, but for the benefit of all? Because yeah.
But to add to this, I'm not saying, I don't want anybody to get wrong that I wasn't surprised. I love Eddie's work. We actually went to Mexico last year to pick up some masks for another project of his. So I definitely loved meeting Eddie last year, because I don't know, I feel like we're definitely talking about very similar topics, but in a very personal level, and it's so different, aesthetically. He really loves monochromatic work, and I do as well, but it has different tonalities, right? So yeah, I love the narratives and the stories that he kind of constructs, and in this either parting from a personal point of view or from people that he meets along the way, but they become very mystical in a way, right? Yeah.
If you have questions for each other, don't let me stop you.
I don't know.
For my part, I'd just like to thank you both for being so gracious with sitting down and answering these pains of questions that I was throwing at you, and giving everyone a bit of insight into what you've done here. I think it's fantastic work, and I think it does play so well together. It makes me wonder, as both of your bodies of work evolve, if there's a convergence point in some show in the future where we get to see these side by side again.
Yeah. That'll be interesting. Maybe do an installation.
Maybe. I don't know. Just keep pushing the same exhibition. Yeah. Any question from the audience? No?
Well, I just want to say that now that you guys talk about the work all together, it's so interesting that the work, it's all about individuals, right? And the story that you each are going through. But it's so crazy that it's presented at the urban scale, at the domestic scale, and then at the scale of the individual. So that was pretty interesting, just to wrap it all up together. Just amazing. It's great.
Thank you. That's amazing analysis.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Well, let's please give them a round of applause for amazing work, amazing conversations. And if you came in at the buzzer and haven't had a chance to walk around yet, please do. We're not closed yet, so you can take a look at everything. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.